Good afternoon. My name is Cameron Kaufman. I'm the student president of the Buckley Program. I'd like to welcome you to this special event tonight. We have a conversation with Ken Langone over here, moderated by Richard West, and we're very much looking forward to this new event in a new format. And so before I introduce Mr. West, I would like to make a couple quick announcements. Firstly, for those of you who don't know much about the Buckley Program, we're an organization of about 300 plus students dedicated to increasing intellectual diversity on campus and free speech. We do so in a variety of ways, including hosting lectures, dinner seminars, firing line debates, and conferences. You can learn more about the program on our website, buckleyprogram.com. Secondly, I'd just like to say up until fall break, we won't be having any events open to the general public, but we do have a couple great opportunities for Buckley Fellows, 2 exciting dinner seminars, so be on the lookout for that, and for a Fellows Happy Hour to welcome in our new class of admitted Buckley Fellows. We accepted almost 50 fellows this semester, so we're very excited about that. And now, on to our event today. As our interviewer, we're lucky to be able to have Mr. Richard West, a strong supporter of the Buckley Program. Dick West is Dean Emeritus at New York University Stern School of Business. He served as the dean there from 1984 to 1995, and before that, served as the dean of Dartmouth's Amos Tuck Business School for 6 years. In addition to working in academia, Mr. West serves as director of 23 investment companies managed by Merrill Lynch Investment Managers. And then he'll be introducing Mr. Langone, our other guest today, and then they'll be talking about the state of capitalism on college campuses, Mr. Langone's career, and Mr. Langone's book, I Love Capitalism, An American Story. So please join me in welcoming Dick West and Ken Langone.
Thank you very much. Cameron, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to this conversation with Ken Langone, the author of the recent bestseller, I Love Capitalism, 5th edition, I think we have going right now. Co-founder of Home Depot, as well as an investment banker who has helped bring any number of wonderful companies public, including, by the way, something called EDS. Some of you are old enough to remember. And along with his wife, Elaine, one of the true great modern philanthropists, literally in the traditions of the great people of the latter part of the last century, meaning the 19th century, the Carnegies and the like. And don't be modest with me. As Cameron said, I'm Dick West, Yale class of 1960, great Yale class of 1960, Bart Giamatti's class, so I can say that. Several decades ago, when I was the dean of the business school at NYU, I got to know Ken, and as Cameron said, more recently I've been involved with the Buckley Program, and it was these 2 things that got us to persuade Ken to come and spend some time with us. Although, as he told us earlier today, he's done several of these on college campuses and going to do some more. My role is very simple, though. It's just to get a conversation started with him so that you can really talk with him about what have interested your mind and what's of interest to him. Now, I know some of you have had a chance to read his book because people have been he's been signing it on behalf of people. But for those who haven't, let me note that it really has a very strong autobiographical flavor, where his views about and support of capitalism are developed in a kind of inductive way. It's what Ken learned to become a believer in capitalism. This is not an intellectual discussion, although near the end of the book, he gets pretty intellectual, if I may say so. So Ken, given that the book is autobiographical, let's get to capitalism by talking a little bit about your life, the start of your life, your upbringing, your education, and how you got into business. Because it's the business, of course, that made you a capitalist.
Let me throw a bouquet at you first. I graduated. NYU Business School was only a night program when I went. I got my degree in October of 1960, about the time when you were getting your degree at Yale.
Yeah.
And off I went to pursue my career. I never heard from anybody. And one day a guy calls me on the phone by the name of Dick West. And he said he'd like to come see me. And he was, is, and always will be, in my opinion, very impressive. And I wrote my first check. The reason I didn't write a check is nobody asked me. So That's an old lesson in salesmanship. You know, it doesn't hurt to ask for the order. And that was the beginning of this great love affair I've had with NYU. And so, Dick, I think you should take a certain measure of satisfaction in all that's happened between NYU and you these past 35, 40 years.
Well, I do, but someone else would have found you sooner or later.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But you did. That's the important thing. So let me tell you about my career, my life. It's very simple. I have grandparents that came from, so you understand something, I am passionately pro-immigration. But I'm passionately a believer in borders, and I'm a believer in orderly process. My grandparents came through Ellis Island, and Lee Iacocca got to me about the same time you did, and got me wrapped up in the restoration of Ellis Island. And the motive for that was principally that I could put my grandparents' names on the wall because they came through there. Now let me tell you about my grandparents. My father's mother was born in 1882 in New York City. So she's, I guess you call her a Yankee among Italians because she was born here. My father's father came from Rome. And my mother's parents came from a little town east of Naples up in the hills called Avellino. My grandfather on my mother's side left school when he was 6 years old. And 66 years later, when he died, he couldn't write or read either Italian or English. He was totally illiterate. And he came over here. He was married in Italy. He and my grandmother had 2 children. He came over here, and he lived in a room with 11 other men on Mulberry Street for 2 years to save enough money for his wife and his 2 children to come to America. And the thing I know about my grandfather is inside his mind, I believe in genes, by the way. I think if you really want to have a good idea about your health, your history has a lot to do with it. Know about it. Very interesting. He couldn't read and he couldn't write either English or Italian. But his big event of the week was listening to the Texaco broadcast of the Metropolitan Opera on Saturday afternoons. So I have to give him some credit for some cultural leanings which didn't pass down to me, I can assure you. I hate the opera. Thank God for those damn things they got in the backs of the seats that I can know what the hell somebody's saying to somebody on the stage, besides the screaming and the crying and the yelling. But he came over here, and his entire life, he made a living with his hands. And I have a picture in my office of my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. My grandmother's sitting like this, and he's standing up. And the reason it was taken like that was my grandmother was taller than my grandfather, and his ego couldn't suffer that. So the way they made up for it was Grandma sat down and Grandpa stood up. And on his left side was his hand. And if you look at the picture, it doesn't take much to see it. His thumb is grotesque from the calluses that accumulated over 66 years of that shovel in his hand every day. My mother went to the 7th grade and my father went to the 8th grade. They were not a family of intellectual curiosity, but they were very American. And the thing they came here for was a better life for their children and their grandchildren. And every morning when I put this pin on, every single morning, I'm also a patriot, by the way. I look up at the ceiling and I say, Grandma and Grandpa, thanks for coming to America. And the thing I insisted about with Random House was that the book had an overarching theme. And so you'll notice the subtitle is An American Story, because this could only happen in America. No place on this earth that I could have done what I've done, and so I give a lot of credit, Certainly I had the initiative, and I had the ambition, and I had the energy. But with all that, I'd have probably had it in Italy the same amount. But the results would have been nothing like they were because of America. So we had this very humble family, patriots. My grandmother was having children when her oldest daughter was also having children. So I have uncles who are younger than cousins. And one of the things our family is proudest of, probably the last noble war we've been engaged in was World War II. And it was a noble war. If you study what was going on in Europe and the atrocities and the horrors of it, that was a noble war. I'm not sure about Korea, and I'm certainly positive Vietnam wasn't a noble war, nor was where we are now. Might shock you. You think I'm some nut to the way right that believes, I challenge But anyway, I have a cousin. He's dead now. His name was Tommy Zito, and he came from Brooklyn. His mother was the oldest child of my grandparents. His mother was born in Italy, and Tommy was in World War II. He went to war. He was 20 years old when he went to war, 1941. And I have the 4 citations that he received from March of 1943 until November of 1944. That's a little bit more than 19 months. And in those 19 months, he got 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Silver Stars, one of which he got June 6, 1944 on Omaha Beach. Okay? This was the greatest generation that Tom Brokaw wrote about. And this, to me, is the backbone of this great country, these people. And a little bit of humor. When Tommy came back, he became a lather. And now you have sheetrock. Thank God, or Home Depot would be out of business. But back then, they used to put strips of wood and then plaster. The walls would be plastered. Tommy was a lather. He put the strips up prior to the plaster going on the walls. And when these kids all came home, I was 10 years old when the war was over. When these kids all came home, families in celebration of these kids, don't forget they came home heroes. That was one of the great attributes of that war. They came home as heroes. Because none of them wanted to go. They were all conscripted. Is not me? Okay.
Keep going.
And they would literally, without getting permits like you have to today, they'd simply block off the street and throw a hell of a block party. All the Goombas would make homemade wine, which stuck to your teeth. It was so thick. I mean, it was, you had to really want to get drunk on that stuff. That's all right. So anyway, at this block party for my cousin Tommy,
It's just a problem with Yale.
who had these 4, or maybe they're warning that I'm here, I might be an endangered species on this campus. And so I said, and he was the oldest grandchild, and I was the youngest grandchild. And during World War II, our movie industry manufactured propaganda movies. The Japanese and the Germans were the bad guys, and we were always the good guys. And you go to a movie and you get 2 B movies, 3 cartoons, 2 cereals, and a frozen popsicle for 12 cents, the whole thing. And the kids would go to the movies at 1 o'clock and come out at 5 o'clock. And it was a way of motivating us as a society to be back. So my cousin comes home and I said, Cuz, tell me what it was like. Tell me what it was like. He was a machine gunner. And if you read the citations for those 4 medals, he was a little guy. He was a gutsy little guy. He said, Cuz, he says, it was great. He said, if I killed a guy in Brooklyn, they'd put me in prison. He said, every time I kill somebody over there, they gave me a medal, he said. So here, this is this country. And why did they all come here? Because there was nothing for them where they were. On Sundays during the war, those of us that were not in the war would all go to my grandmother's for Sunday lunch. And there's a show on television that I watch just because of the family dinner. It's called Blue Bloods on Friday night. And I watch it because this family of cops all get together, and it reminds me of my childhood. And after the lunch, the woman, as was typical of an Italian family, would all go in the kitchen and clean up. And the men would all go in the living room and fall asleep. And the children would be on the floor. It was linoleum floors, no rugs. And we'd be writing letters to our cousins and our uncles that were in the war effort. Every Sunday, we all had to write a letter to one uncle or one cousin. And while I was writing a letter to my cousin, my Uncle Gene, who was in Italy at the time, I asked my mother to ask my grandfather, who couldn't speak English, and by the way, to understand this, he couldn't speak English and he couldn't write or read. He insisted that his children only speak in English to their children. He was adamant his grandchildren were going to be Americans, and they were going to speak the language, and they were going to assimilate into the society, and they were going to take advantage of all the opportunities of this country that he came here for. So I said, Mom, ask Grandpa if he'd ever been back to Italy. She asked him in Italian, and she said no. And then I said, well, why didn't he go back to Italy? So she asked him in Italian, why didn't you go back to Italy? And his answer was, there was nothing there for me. That's why I left. Why would I go back? Understand something. How many other countries on this earth do you have to struggle, or do you want to get into? Like people want to come here. We're it. And so this upbringing I had was rich in love, unconditional love, respect for each other, and adoration for education. Because they all knew the way out of the ghetto, the Italian ghetto or the Polish ghetto, whatever it was through education. That was it. And so from my very first memories was drummed into my head, and I say in the book, every time we'd go through this rich section, which was not so rich, but it looked rich compared to where I lived in the town, my mother would say to me, on my way to my grandmother's for lunch on Sunday, every Sunday, my dad had a little Ford panel truck that he bought used for his plumbing business, and my mother sat on a wooden milk box next to him because there was no seat. And she would say to me, and I'd be in the back where there were no windows, she would say to me, do you want to live here one day? And I said, yes, I do. She said, well, then you got to get an education and you got to work hard. Okay? That was the genius of what they were. And thank God, I had the benefit of being born in this country because, as I said, my life would never have happened as it did. Certainly not in Italy or any place else that I can think of in this world, except in this country. So that's a summary, Dick, of, and I had great opportunities. I had the enormity of the number of people that helped me along the way. And I mentioned in the book that if you gave me Yankee Stadium, it wouldn't be big enough to hold all the people that gave me a shove or a break or a help along the way. I'm not being modest, I'm being terribly honest. I'm not self-made.
You went to public schools.
I went to public schools all the way through, and I got a wonderful public. And by the way, those public schools where I went today, anybody from Long Island? Okay. Roslyn, Port Washington, Manhasset, Great Neck, Syosset, Jericho, those schools turn out great students. They have great teachers, and there's high accountability among the teachers. I fought like hell not to get an education, but thank God for the perseverance. Thank God for the perseverance of my teachers, I got an education, okay? And so we know that we know that public schools can work. Did you go to a public school? Where'd you go? Which one? Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but that's a hell of a school, by the way. Great school. Oh, well, they are. Yeah, well, but these were great schools. Why? They're run by parents, boards of education, or people who live in that town. And there's a high level of accountability. And there's a great competitive environment, school district to school district, whether it's on the athletic field or whether it's in the classroom. And look at my high school, Michael Crichton, Eddie Lampert, there's 4 guys that really did well, and then there's me. But there's 2 other guys. At 83, you get a little fuzzy in the head. Okay. Anyway, so Dick, that's the flavor of my life.
Just a minute talking. You went to Bucknell.
I went to
I
Bucknell.
just want to get, those who haven't read the book, we get you through college, and then...
Well, college wasn't easy to get through. I mean, let's not, eventually it was. First of all, I wasn't going to college. The Korean War was on when I was in my senior year in high school. The Korean War was on. Eisenhower had just been elected president in '52 when he became president in January '53. And I got jilted by a girl, thank God. I saw her years later, and I said, oh my God, boy, did I duck a bullet there. Wow. But I'm only kidding, all right? That's kind of cruel, I'm only kidding. So I was going in the Marine Corps, and 2 friends of mine that I played basketball against from Port Washington, I was from Roslyn, invited me to Bucknell for a house party weekend. Now, you wouldn't know what that is because they don't have them anymore. But all you did was party, and I went up for this weekend, and I said, Christ, if this is all they do in college, I'm coming, okay? And so they used to have Saturday morning classes at Bucknell, and the parties were Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and Sunday. And Saturday morning, they still had classes. So my friends all had to go to class, and they said, hey, look, there's a Carnegie Library. Andrew Carnegie built libraries all over America. The Carnegie Library is over there. There's a guy in there, go see him and say hello to him. Well, they didn't call him the Dean of Admissions, he was called the Registrar. And I went in to see him, and he said, what are you doing here? And I said, nothing. I said, my friends Jim McNamara and J.R. Davis said I should come here and talk to you about what? I said, I don't know. So he said, well, come on in. And he said to me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm a senior in high school. And what are you going to do? I'm going to the Marines. My brother was in the Army. He was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. And I said, I'm going to the Marine Corps. Because this is, gung-ho. And he said, well, let's talk a little bit. And we talked about my jobs. I worked at a grocery store. I baled cardboard. I sold Christmas wreaths. Because I always wanted to have a buck in my pocket. And if I wanted a buck in my pocket, I had 2 ways to get it, steal it or earn it. Because my parents had nothing. We had plenty to eat, and we had a warm house, no air conditioning. But there was never much in the way of surplus. So we talked for 45 minutes to an hour, and he thanked me for coming in. I left, and the following Thursday, I get a letter from him. I didn't apply, which means Bucknell must have been short a few applicants. It ain't that way anymore, but it's highly competitive now. So anyway, he wrote and he said to me that if I wanted to come, I decided I didn't want to go in the Marine Corps and I wanted to come to Bucknell. He'd like to offer me a position in the senior.
And so you got admitted
without
an application.
And
I think I knew he was going to be successful right then.
And at the bottom of the letter, in handwriting, he wrote, in college, you'll have to work much harder than you did in high school. Well, that wasn't hard because I didn't do a thing in high school. That was a very low bar for me. But so off I went to Bucknell, and I had professors who really helped me. One guy, I was getting ready to flunk out in my freshman year. The night I graduated from Roslyn High School, my mother worked in the school cafeteria, so all the teachers knew Mom. The principal went to my mother and said, Angie, my name was Angelina, and they called her Angie. She said, Angie, you and your husband work so hard for the little bit you have. I hope you know you're wasting your money sending this boy to college because he's not college material. And the next day, what we used to do then, we all used to go to Montauk Point after graduation. So that night I went to Montauk Point, and the next morning I come home, and I come into the living room at 11 o'clock in the morning, and my mother's sitting in a chair bawling, crying. And my first thought was, who died? She said, nobody died. And I said, well, what are you crying for? She said, well, Mr. Ross told me you're going to flunk out of college. He was almost right. If I hadn't have met a professor in my economics class who saw more in me than I saw in myself, really, and that man made an effort to pull me out of, because all I was doing was going to parties. It was rush, you know, the fraternities, you got invited into the fraternities 8 weeks after you were there, and before that it was all rush. You know, fraternity parties and sorority parties, what the hell? Let the good times roll, right? I mean, I'm an 18-year-old kid, what else are you supposed to do? And this guy grabbed me, and my English was terrible, horrible. And he used to throw a quiz at us every once in a while. And in the 2 weeks, it was about 6 weeks into the semester, he said, explain supply and demand. And we had 3 classes. We had a class about this size on Tuesday and Thursday, and they had 3 sections. And on Saturday, we met in the auditorium, all 3 sections. And he, the head of the department, taught that class. And so we're in this big room. Half of us are hungover because, you know, you kids have to understand something. You got nothing on us. With a few things, we pretty much went through life the same way you did when we were students. So anyway, at the end of the class, we had taken this test a week or 2 before. And at the end of the class, he's up on the stage, this big auditorium. He said, is there a Mr. Langone in the room? And my first thought was, oh, shit. Oh, man. So I raised my hand. I want to see you after class. Oh. So I go to his class. I'm not doing well. I'm flunking every one of my courses, including ROTC. Because I wasn't going to ROTC. I mean, you know, I wasn't going to the Marine Corps. I wasn't going, and that was it. So I sat in his room. He was a very intimidating guy, smart. And he takes my exam book and he throws it on the desk. And he says, that's the worst English I've ever read in my entire life. He said, I can't tell you how I struggled to get through that exam book. He said, but I'm glad I did. He said, you know, he said, you got a nose for this subject. That's very unique. And he said, how you doing in your other classes? I said, about as good as I'm doing in yours. And he said to me, I'll make a deal with you. He said, if you promise to, and what he said, if you promise to work your ass off, I'm going to get around to all your other professors and see if we can pull you out of this nosedive. And he did, and they did, and I did. And I graduated from Bucknell in 3.5 years. No summer schools. My last semester I was married, and I took 2 semesters in one. And if that man hadn't put his head, hadn't seen something in me that I didn't see in myself, I wouldn't be here today. So Dick, these are the stories. Jules Bogan at NYU. You know, so I go from 1953, where I'm on the brink of being thrown out. Fast forward 8 years, I'm teaching at NYU. You know, that wasn't me. That was all these people along the way, like Bogan and Marcus Nadler. You know who called me up? Cabbage called me.
As, by the way, for those of you who don't know, there are some truly famous names in any university, and at the business school at NYU, historically, a man named Jules Bogan.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
Who this man named a room after, by the way, along with his father-in-law,
Thank
Abby
you.
Bogan.
You were there. Well, you were there then when that
There,
happened.
trust me, I was there.
And so what I'm saying to you is that it was this fortuitous thing in my life to have met these people and to have them take a liking to me, which was sometimes was not easy to do. I was a cocky kid. I was always cocky. I mean, you know, I was ready to get my head knocked off every once in a while. But so here are all these wonderful people all along the way. My father-in-law, Jules Bogan, I go on and on and on. And so when we talked about the book really is as much a tribute to all those people, because it's amazing the impact we can have on each other if we really care for each other. And I think this is some of what I see missing in America today, Dick. Anyway, so
Well, let's open it up. Now,
Go ahead.
Again,
I hope there's some people who don't like what I stand for.
The whole book, and obviously, from the time Ken got out of Bucknell and did some part-time study at NYU
Yep.
and got himself into the investment banking business, and we could talk about EDS. Again, some of you don't probably remember anymore electronic data systems, a man named Ross Perot. We could talk about Ross Perot. Obviously, Home Depot. We could talk about all of your recent philanthropy. But obviously, one of the things that came out of all of this was a sense that the system you were in, which we'll generally call a capitalist
Right.
system, a roughly free enterprise system, subject to corporate capitalism and all that stuff, you concluded that not only that worked well for you, which it obviously did,
Right.
but that it was a better system than other systems.
And you know, Dick, in the spirit of understanding where we were as a society, the deck was stacked against me because of my ethnicity. I'll tell you, explain why. I went into the Army in '58 and got out in 6 months. Then I got called back into the Army when they built a wall around Berlin. And when I got out, I said, I'm going to Wall Street. And my father-in-law, who was in the business, set me up with some people in Wall Street. And along the way, I met a man by the name of Maurice Hart. And he was with a firm called New York Hanseatic. They traded foreign issued bonds of governments and of foreign corporations. And he was a lovely man. So he told me, he said, look, he said, you don't want a job here. We're a small trading firm. He said, but you got a pretty good education. You know, you got this MBA. And he said, Jules Bogan says nice things about you, and Marcus Nadler did as well. These were truly luminaries.
They were.
They were unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Powerful men. And he said, I want you to go around and interview all these different firms. So I went to, by the way, they're all gone now. Whitewell, Merrill Lynch, Clark Dodge, Lee Higginson, Goldman Sachs, you name it. And he said, when you get all done, come back and see me. So I went back to see him, and I said, Mr. Hart, it was the spring of '62, and times were tough. We had in May the biggest crash of the stock market since 1929. I said, Mr. Hart, I'm having a rough time. I had a wife and one child, and my second son was about to be born in September. I said, Mr. Hart, I'm really having a rough time. I can't get a nibble. He said, well, let me tell you the lay of the land. He was Jewish. He said, we have WASP firms for the WASPs. We have Jewish firms for the Jews. The Irish kids we put on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange as clerks. And the Italian kids we put in the back office as clerks. Because that's the way the system works.
Runners, among other things.
I am runners and menial stuff. And he said, kid, you're better than that. You go find yourself an institution and get a job there. And then you're going to find yourself in better shape. And that's exactly what I did. That was '57, by the way. And that's exactly what I did. And I could sit and wring my hands about how unfair life is. And it's uneven, for sure. And I guess you could say it's unfair. But I think you got a choice in life, Dick, of wringing your hands and saying, woe is me, or you can say, I'm going to get off my ass and give it all I got and work like hell. I traveled an average of 200,000 miles a year for 25 years. It's a lot of travel. I had a business in San Diego, but I used to leave my office in 1972. I left my office I'd leave my office on Thursday at 2 o'clock, go to Kennedy Airport. There was no direct flight to San Diego then. Plane was an American Airlines flight, New York, Dulles, pick up a bunch of military people, Dulles to San Diego. Get there at 9 o'clock Thursday night, go up to the plant, work. I'm still working on Wall Street, but I got this company I took over. Work till midnight, drive back down to San Diego, which We were up on Sorrento Valley Road and off of 5. Get 3 or 4 hours sleep, get up, go back to the plant at 6:30 in the morning, Friday morning, work till noon, drive down to the airport, take a PSA flight from San Diego to LA, get American Airlines Flight 4 from LA to New York, and get back home midnight Friday night. Because I had 3 little boys, soccer, lacrosse, football, and it was always Saturday. I did that for 90 consecutive Thursdays and Fridays, including Thanksgiving on a Thursday. And you know what? I'm glad I did it. I worked hard, and I won much larger than I ever thought I would. But I can guarantee you, the more you put into it, even with bad breaks and even with disadvantage, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. At least it worked for me that way. And if you look at me, and if you saw me, you'd know that I'm not terribly intellectually gifted. I'm not. But I'll kill you with energy, and I'll kill you with effort. And I think that's what I pray for in America today. You look at a guy like Tom Monahan that started Domino's. You look at Dave Thomas, who started Wendy's. You know, the stories are all out there about all these people that worked their asses off, pardon my French, and look at how well they did. That is, to me, not their genius, but the genius of this country. That's America. There's no place like it. If there was, they'd be fighting like hell to get in there, the way they're fighting like hell to get in here. Okay? Anyway,
Questions?
Questions? Yes, sir.
I regard Mr. Greenberg.
Oh, good.
Hank Greenberg?
That's all right.
Yeah,
I just had lunch with him today.
all right. He gave quite a bit of money to this university also for a
Yale?
conference center at Yale. And I regard him as one of the best business people we've had in this
The
country.
very best.
Elliot Klein
Spitzer.
9 Spitzer brought
My
a
buddy.
lot of
My
against
buddy.
him and gave your buddy. Yeah, sure.
I got
No,
him
what
good.
I'd read in the journal is that you had paid someone to follow him around and to try to get information on him. I don't know if you're able to say yes or no.
Oh,
but
I'm going to give you.
curious.
I'll tell you the whole story. No,
Curious.
no. Some of you may not know. I was chairman of the compensation committee of the New York Stock Exchange. I was on the board. Private, owned by its members, our money, all our money. A plan that was put in place in 1982 by a man by the name of Stanley Galt, who was the head of Rubbermaid Corporation.
Stan Galt, yes.
And he insisted that this plan was needed to get people to stay at the New York Stock Exchange. Up until Dick Grasso, I'm giving you more of an answer than you want, but I have.
No. I'm enjoying the answer.
Up until Dick Grasso took the job
As the head.
as the chairman
Yeah.
of the stock exchange, every previous chairman came from someplace else after they retired from someplace else. So Mel Batten, who had been the head of J.C. Penney, he served for 5 years. Bill Donaldson, who there's a place named after him here at Yale, he retired and he served for 10 years. So Jim Needham, who was a partner in an accounting firm and then a commissioner of the SEC, he served for 5 years. And there was a plan that for every year of service you got at the stock exchange, you got 2.5% credit of the target number. Okay? So a guy that was there 5 years got 12.5%. Dick Grasso got out of the Army as an enlisted man, went to work at the New York Stock Exchange as an $82.50 a week union clerk. He had to join the union, and never left.
And never went to college.
And never went to college. When he became chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, he was the very first chairman of the New York Stock Exchange to start where he did all the way to the top. Now, he had 37 years of service times 2.5%. He fit the mold that Stan Galt wanted to a T. And when you did the math, it turned out to be an enormous number. But let me tell you the better part. In 1974, I bought 2 seats on the New York Stock Exchange for $72,000 apiece. Fast forward. I sold my 2 seats in 2003 for $8 million apiece. Pretty good investment.
You did well.
When Dick became chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, there were 1,200 listings. When he left, there were 2,800. We had to insist at the end that he use private planes, which he wouldn't have the exchange have one, but if he was going to go from Greensboro, North Carolina to Peoria, Illinois, I can guarantee you there's no direct flights from Greensboro to Peoria. You fly down to Atlanta, you exchange planes, you go up to Chicago, and then you get a flight to Peoria. It's, what normally in my plane, yeah, I have my own plane, by the way, and I like it. And it's a big one, okay, and I love it, okay? I told my wife she goes before the plane, okay? 62 years we're married, so guess what? I ain't messing with that either. But this guy killed himself and made all of us, every single one of us, very, very, very rich. Kids that bought seats as clerks left with 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 million dollars. And during those years, they were making 350, no high school, no college education. Guys on the floor of the exchange running back and forth from crowds, making $500,000 a year. It was capitalism at its very best, and it worked. And it worked for everybody. So Spitzer now decides he needs some headlines. And he finds out about Grasso's pay package. And John F. Kennedy wrote a book called Profiles in Courage. He wouldn't have many characters from the New York Stock Exchange Board of Directors in that book. I can guarantee you that. Some of the biggest names, most powerful names, all waffled. I didn't know it. I didn't see it. I don't know how he got paid. I might have been there. Remember Sergeant Schultz and Mash? I could have been there. I might have been there. Maybe I was there. I'm not sure I was there. They all got amnesia. Now, the old dad, the one thing I do is cross the T's and dot the I's. I made sure every member of the compensation committee of the New York Stock Exchange, if they couldn't make a meeting, and most of them, not that they couldn't be bothered, I would make sure that representatives from the HR department would go to their office and walk them through the math on Grasso's pay package. For every single action of the comp committee, they got personal visits where they didn't come to the meeting. Every one. And they were documented. So now Spitzer shows up. And by the way, they're all paying $500 million, $600 million, $800 million fines. They're terrified. They're acting like cowards. And whatever the SEC and whatever Spitzer wanted, they paid it. The biggest names in the business acted like cowards. So here I am. I'm saying, wait a minute. I know what I did. And if I was given the choice to do it again, I'd vote for it again. I'm not supporting Grasso. I'm supporting my judgment. I'm a good businessman, and I think we got our money's worth, and I'm glad we played him. Now, it turned out to be $140 million. That's not chump money, but he earned it, in my opinion. So you take 1,366 seats times $8 million apiece, that's the math of what he generated because of all these listings. So anyway, I get a lawyer. They tell me I need a white-collar criminal lawyer. Figure that one out, okay? I didn't get a nickel out of this, but I'm chairman of the comp committee. And my lawyer is a very prominent lawyer by the name of Gary Neftalis. Nice man. And so early on, Spitzer gets the word to he's got all these other guys to waffle. Every one of them. All these biggest names on Wall Street, you name them, they all took a dive for this guy. And he gets to me. No way, I'm not settling. So Gary goes down, is called to a meeting in Spitzer's office on a Friday afternoon. And Spitzer says, tell your buddy that we're going to bring charges against him and Grasso on Monday. And it's going to be ugly. Now, I don't want your friend, he said, I want Grasso. Grasso got the money, not Langone. So all I want Langone to do is come in here and settle with us. So we can go to Grasso. That's how they work. It's like dominoes. They knock one over and then the other and the other. and you're all adults, so I can use the language I use. Gary calls me up and says, Elliot doesn't want you, he wants to settle with you. I said, Gary, you don't work for me very long, but it's going to be a really short career for you. If the word settlement ever comes out of your mouth, you're fired. I said, you go tell that rat bastard that we're going to have a fight, and I'm going to win the fight. And that's what I want you to go tell him. Well, Gary was the diplomat that he was. One end says, I don't think my client wants to settle. And Spitzer says to him, he didn't want to tell him, I said, you're going to be fired. And Spitzer says to him, well, tell your client that 90% of all the cases settle on the courthouse steps. And Gary said, what about the other 10%? So off we go to war. And it was more a PR war than it was a legal war. And he fought dirty, really dirty. And thank God, look, have I made mistakes in my life? Sure I have. But there isn't one mistake in my life I've made that I would never have a problem having on the front page of a newspaper. Okay? I made a lot of mistakes, but they're mistakes I can still hold my head high. You know. And so this went on for some time, and he left. He became governor, and he left Andrew with the case. Now he's riding high as governor of the state of New York. The sheriff of Wall Street is now the governor. That's what he called himself. He was going to be the sheriff of Wall Street. Now this is how it happened, as God is my witness. My lovely wife needed a new hip. And on Monday in March of 2008, I went out to the island. We lived out in the island. We still do in Sands Point. And I went out to make sure the nurses were there and everything was set up. That very night, I was on the board of the Medal of Honor Foundation. And Dick Grasso, every year, threw a dinner at the Tribeca Grill for all the Medal of Honor recipients from all over the United States. And Dick and I were supposed to be there. I went home, everything was, as I'm driving out to the island, on the radio it's announced that Elliot Spitzer has been nailed as a client of a prostitute, and on and on and on and on and on. This is exactly as it happened. I was stunned. I said, Alvaro, go through all the red lights, get home. I got to see this on television. He's going to be on television. I want to see this guy go down. It's not good enough to hear it. I want to see it. So I get home, and I barely ask my wife how she's feeling. Thank God the nurses were there, and everything was set up. And I said, Elaine, put a television on. And sure enough, there he shows up. Now, I had to go back in for the Medal of Honor dinner, but I also had arranged to have a cocktail with Ed Hurley, a very prominent banking lawyer who was a senior partner at Wachtell Lipton in New York. And I was going to meet Ed for a drink with a fellow by the name of Tony Carbonetti, who was deputy mayor under Rudy Giuliani, or he was chief of staff, I'm sorry. And we were going to have a drink at the Four Seasons, the old Four Seasons, at 5:30. So we're there, and we're all can't believe what we're hearing. I mean, nobody's talking about anything in New York except Elliot Spitzer's dalliances, okay? So Tony says, you know, he said, I just got a call from a friend of mine. He said he was waiting in line at the Grand Central Post Office, the money order window, and he swore that Elliot Spitzer was standing right in front of him. Now, the line where you wait to get to the window is about 4 feet from the window. He could not hear Spitzer ask for a money order for $2,800. So he says to me back at we were having a drink, he says, yeah, he said, Spitzer got a money order for $2,800 at the Grand Central Station money order window. Oh. No, so obviously, that's where I learned about it. So now I go down to Tribeca Bill, and that little rat Grasso, he knew the media was going to be in front because they knew we were going to be there. He goes through the kitchen. Stupid me, I go in right through the front entrance, and here's this gaggle of reporters with these boom microphones. And the guys, they were all swearing that I brought them down, that I had them tailed and I did this. I said, wait a minute, fellas. I said, you're wrong. You're 100% wrong. I said, I do know for a fact that he bought a $2,800 money order at the money order window of the Grand Central Post Office in January or February, whatever the hell it was. And I said, that's it. And I walked in, and the guys, well, you got anything else? I said, yeah, let me tell you something. Let me tell you about this guy. I said, we all have our own private hells. And by the way, we all have burdens. I don't care who you are. God is good. We all get a dose. And I think that helps us keep some degree of humility. Some of us get more, some of us get less, but we all get a dose. And I said, look, I know every single person has their own private hell. I just hope that bastard's as hotter than anybody else's. And of course, by then now I'm a folk hero, and they make a movie, and that bastard De Niro, the guy that played me, he wouldn't let him be taller than him. So you have some guy, they got Danny DeVito to play me, okay? I can guarantee you on my children's lives, God is good. He dumped us all in my lap. I was just sat here, and every time I got near Elliot, every single time I got near him, I got a chance to give him a shot. And you know what? I never failed to take advantage of the opportunity. Bad guy, bad guy. Anyway,
Another question.
Okay, what's the other question?
I've got plenty of them, but
Yes, sir.
So I would just like to ask you about the recent donation you and your wife made to NYU Medical School and the recent decision to have medical school tuition paid for.
Right.
And your thoughts on that and on creating opportunity and also creating more doctors.
Okay. I'm going to guess the average age in this room is 21. Maybe high, maybe.
with certain exceptions.
Average. I said average age.
Even
Average
with
age.
the average, you're
Oh,
probably...
these old guys, these kids pull the average down. Come on. The averages work. When you're 33 years old, there's going to be a shortage of 50,000 primary care physicians in America. There's going to be a shortage of 30,000 pediatricians and a shortage of 30,000 OBGYN. Okay? I asked myself the question, my wife and I, and first of all, let me tell you about this lady. We were two poor kids, and we had, let me give you an aside. When I decided to give in, when I took the job as chairman 19 years ago, and I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to make a statement that I'm in. And my wife was adamant she wanted us to do it, but not with any notoriety. So we agreed to give $100 million anonymously to the Met, which was on its ass then. It was in bad shape. By the way, bragging, NYU Medical School is ranked number 3 in America today. Harvard's 1, Hopkins 2, and we're 3. Harvard and Hopkins, watch out, okay? That's all I can tell. So I went home.
Not very competitive.
Oh, no. Juices run hot and fast. I went home and I said to Elaine, I'm going to do this. I think I can help. And I said, I think we ought to make a statement. And that's when she said, no publicity. Okay. I said, I think we should give them $100 million. And God bless her. She said, do we have that kind of money? Yeah, I said, I think we can handle it. Okay. And here's how I feel. I'm always going to have good health care, and you're always going to, and most of you people in this room are going to have good health care. But the gap between the quality of health care is going to get worse and worse and worse over time. And who's going to be the people that aren't going to have it? It's going to be people like my grandparents, people like my parents, people like me and my brother as little boys, okay? That's what I was thinking about. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be a judge and say, you can afford it, so you don't get it. And you can't afford it, so I'm going to make sure you get it. We took the position to say, any kid that we accept, if you come here, it's on us. Now, Rosenberg, is that the?
Rosenthal.
Rosenthal.
I
have a simple
a
thought.
lady by the name of Dr. Rosenthal, very quickly, if I may, Ken,
You
put
go
it in
ahead.
perspective, very quickly after it was announced that essentially tuition was going to be no longer something you paid in the medical school at NYU. she wrote an op-ed piece, I have a copy of it here, in the New York Times, in which she said some things.
She criticized it.
She criticized.
I have a simple thought. Mrs. Rosenthal, you do what you want with your 100 million, and I'll do what I want with my 100 million. Fair enough?
Her argument, because I know that you know this, her argument was, first, there are some people who can clearly afford to pay, and they should. And secondly, you shouldn't be able to become a great eye surgeon without paying something. But on the other hand, if you're willing to claim for the rest of your life you're going to be a rural doctor, GP in some place in wherever, that's fine. Then you should be able to. And you want to comment on that approach?
We know what our approach requires? A huge bureaucracy to keep track of these people. Are they in the rural area? Are they doing what they agreed? Come on. Let me tell you what. We took a very simple point of view, Elaine and I. We said, you know what? These kids, you know what it's like to be in medical school? I like to go there at 2, 3 o'clock in the mornings. When I can't sleep, I go down to the medical center.
Do we have
Have you got any
anybody
medical-
who'd like to go to medical school there? Okay, we got some.
They got knapsacks on their back. And they're sitting on the floor with their knees up, with their books in their laps. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. They're working their asses off. They're going to work like cats and dogs. And by the way, the average medical school student in America graduates with $197,000 in debt. And I don't know family situations. I do know. I knew a guy that was going to become a doctor. He's Jewish, and he was going to marry a Christian. And his father, who was very wealthy, said, if you marry a Christian, you're out of the will, and I'm not doing anything for you. The guy had to put himself through medical school. I don't want to get into arbitrating between the father and the son. She's a nice girl, and, forget about what her faith is. I mean, come on. We're betting that we're going to get 92, 93, 95 kids every year that are going to want to be great doctors. Now, we've done two things, Dick. At our main campus, we have a 3-year program and a 4-year program. You can elect when you start to go into the 3-year program. Here's what it requires. You must declare your specialty before you start medical school. We guarantee you that when you're done with medical school and you go into what they call a match, where you want to do your residency, that we will guarantee you a position in our residency program in that specialty. If you change your mind after you start medical school and you don't want to be in that specialty, then you have to flip into the 4-year program, so you spend 4 years there and not 3 years. We're now starting next year a brand new medical school out in Long Island. We're merging with Winthrop, which is a fabulous hospital out in the island. We're merging with Winthrop, and we're starting all 3 years. But every kid that goes to that medical school is primary care. That's all he or she can be. Okay? We have a crisis coming in America like you can't believe. And it's going to get, and by the way, we're living longer. I can't tell you, I used to go to the doctors maybe once a year. It's like I'm looking at these guys every other day, or I'm on the phone with them. You get old, things start to break. I mean,
Tell me about it.
Stuff happens, okay? And so we're living longer, thank God. Here I am at 83, and I'm so far, so good. But you too, you're 80, right?
80,
God bless you.
almost
Don't
81.
stop. Don't stop. It'll catch you. But we're living longer. We're living more quality life as we live. We're living good quality lives. I can read a book. If I have a problem with my eyes, I go down and they do it. Mark Pochapin, he's keeping people, let me tell you a staggering number. If any one of you people ever get colon cancer, it's mostly going to be because you didn't get a colonoscopy. It's an unpleasant thought, but the best protection you have from cancer is early detection. These are the advances we made in science, and they're getting better. If you live out in Long Island, on your way out on the Grand Central Parkway, there's a bunch of yellow buildings. It was a mental institution called Creedmoor. It was packed. It's empty. All these mind drugs that we brought out, we're helping people to manage their lives when they couldn't do it. Good things are happening. But damn it, the older we get, the more we're going to need care. You get, God forbid, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes, hardening of the arteries. I got a little bullet in my heart, that big, little guy, but that big, right in my heart. They got room for 4 more, so I got it at 82. So I figure it's good for 12 years. So I got, if you add 48 years to 82, I'm around to 130. Okay. Now my adversaries, including Spitzer, wouldn't like that, but they can't have. The point I'm making is, all these wonderful things are happening. We got to figure how we're going to take care of each other. And our bet was, anything we do to help a kid want to become a doctor. Now, what's a high-class problem we have? And that's a high-class problem. We had 9,000 applicants for 92 positions last year. Okay? 2 things are going to happen. We're not just going to get more applicants who
You're going to
apply.
get 18,000 now.
You're also going to get kids who don't want to be doctors because they don't want to run up the debt. So we're going to get the universe of kids. We know we're going to have a lot of kids that are going to apply to our school. Now here's the problem. You don't just want mental giants. You want people that want to be doctors. I have every graduation of the medical school, I tell them the same thing. I tell them, you got your money's worth academically. You're qualified as good as any doctor in this country, scientifically, academics, all that stuff. All your rounds, you've done everything. The one thing we can't teach you that's going to separate you from being a great doctor is compassion and empathy. And you can't see that in numbers. Now, what was the numbers last year? The average GPA that we took was 3.97. And the average MCAT, that's the equivalent of the GMAT or the SATs or whatever, the average was 98th percentile. 92 kids you can, but you got to make damn certain. Now, there's another program where if it's PhD, MD, thank God for our government. If you go into a combined program, the NIH pays for it. And that's good.
And these people are mainly going to become medical scientists.
They're going to they want to go in a room with beakers and, flasks and all the other stuff and find bugs or look for bugs. I mean, not my idea of a good life, but thank God they're there. But what I'm saying to you is, that's why we did it. And my old man used to say to me, if you're going to do something for somebody and expect something back, don't do it. We don't want anything back. But Dick, I'll tell you the thing that disturbs me. Who the hell would have thought I'd be worth this kind of money? I mean, it's crazy. It really is nuts. I look at these numbers on a sheet of paper and I say, but they're just numbers. They have no meaning. They're completely in the abstract to me. And I say to myself, wait a minute. Every nickel I've given away, whether it's to Bucknell or Harlem Children's Zone or NYU Business School or you name it, I got it all back and more. But the time I've given, it's gone. Remember me for that. My wife spends hours and days at the boys club in New York. She could be playing golf. She's a good athlete. She could be playing golf. She could be reading a book. She could be out having lunch with her friends. These are choices we make and we sacrifice. The money is not a sacrifice because once you get to a certain amount, it has babies. If you don't do stupid stuff with it, if you don't piss it away or you don't make bad deals. But what I'm saying to you is, the time is gone. It's over. It's finished. I'm not getting it back. And I wish people would look at philanthropists through that prism, not the wallet. Okay? Okay, what else?
We have time for one more question.
I ain't going any place. Okay, all right. Well, I'll be there.
I'll ask it,
Go ahead.
since no one else will. Near the end of your book, and again, we have some people who've read it, some who have not. It's a good read, by the way. It's a lot of fun. And incidentally, if you've ever just watched Ken with somebody like Neil Cavuto in the afternoon on the Fox News channel or Business Channel, it reads, he talks just like the book. So the book is a fun
By the
read.
way, I did the audio version of the book, 32 hours.
32
That
hours.
was hard work.
I'll bet you it
Now, the
was.
book isn't that long,
No.
but they make you go back and forth. Oh, that doesn't sound like a question. Pull out this. They got this electronics today. They can, and the goddamn this thing
Snip
gonna
it
work.
out.
Yeah, they snip it out. So
Well, although it is primarily autobiographical, near the end of the book, you get a little philosophical. And you
Yep.
talk about specific issues.
yeah,
Talk for a minute about income inequality.
income inequality is the biggest risk to our society today. If you go look at where you have social unrest, right now Venezuela, where the rich get so rich and the poor, that gap gets wide enough. Cuba, how did Castro come to power? Easily. He made sure the campesinos knew they were disadvantaged and they had no hope. Russia, the Russian Revolution. France, let them eat cake. So income inequality is a terribly, terribly disturbing thing that will destabilize any society. The gap between the rich and the poor becomes so wide, you're on thin ice. That said, there's another part to that, education. Of the 30 most developed nations on earth, we rank number 1 in spending per student. And we rank 28th out of 30 in results. The New York City public school, I know this firsthand. I'm in the trenches. I was chairman of this charter school up in Harlem. Jeff Canada, he may have spoken here at Yale. There was a movie made called Waiting for Superman. It's about Jeff. New York City's got 900,000 children in public schools. The number of those kids that can't do 4th or 5th grade work is staggering, and yet they leave with diplomas. It's called social promotion. Those kids haven't got a snowball's chance in hell. We can't hire them at Home Depot. We can't hire them at Home Depot. They got to be able to read directions on a package to help the customer. They have to know math. These kids are being permanently crippled and deprived of the opportunity. Let me give you the alternative to that. Yeah, am I proud about Home Depot? You bet I am. Do I like the fact that it's in Illinois? By the way, of the 500 S&P stocks, Home Depot is the number 1 performing stock in the last 40 years.
Number 1
Number 1.
in the last 40 years.
We have compounded. You people that know math, we have compounded at 27% a year, counting dividends. Now, I'll give you a comparison. Apple's a $1 trillion market cap company. It went public in December of '80, and we went public in September of '81. 9 months. If you owned Apple from then until now, you'd have 42,000+ % appreciation and a 17% compound rate of return, including dividends. Home Depot, you'd have 620,000% appreciation and a 27% compound rate of growth. When Bernie and Arthur and I started the company, anybody that gave me $25,000, and that's how I raised it, 25s and 50s, has $400 million in Home Depot stock today. And I have 3 people that never sold a share of stock. And I'll give you a little funny story. Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, they were doing a fundraiser for him down in Florida, and Elaine and I went. And we walked into these people's house where he was. And Paul Ryan says, "Oh, please, you got to meet my mother. You got to meet my mother. He's the Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives. I got to meet his mother. I want to meet him. That's what I'm going for." So I went there. It was nice. This woman was a school teacher. By the way, black widow. His father died. She got remarried. That guy died. She didn't get remarried. I guess the guy figured this bad luck. Why don't we just live together? So they're living together in Fort Lauderdale. He takes me over to meet his mother. And his mother tells me that in September of '81, a friend of hers, she was a school teacher in Milwaukee, A friend of hers, Janesville, a friend of hers was living in Atlanta and said that they'd gone in the store and they said, you get to your broker and you buy yourself, I don't know how many hundred shares of stock. She said, I've never sold a share of stock.
Wow.
She's got this magnificent home before. So she's living fabulously. That's the story. But the best story of Home Depot, let me tell you the best story. And by the way, I'm here because I want you kids to understand, and pardon me, if you're under 83 years old, you're a kid. So don't get pissed. You're a kid, you're a kid, you're a kid. So all you kids are kids.
I don't
all
feel
right?
that way, but I get you.
Let me give you the number that I'm proudest of. An entry-level job at Home Depot is pushing carts in from the parking lot or helping people load up their car. Entry-level. We have 3,000 kids, barely got out of high school, never went to college, that are multimillionaires today. The woman who runs all 1,700 U.S. stores, we have another 600 in Mexico and Canada and Guam and Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. The woman started with us as a part-time cashier. She came to America from Jamaica, and she runs 1,700 stores. She's got around 330,000 people working for her. That's capitalism, okay? It works, it really works. And contrary to the naysayers, I can't think of a better system. And I'm a passionate advocate of that, because I can only think back to my own life, where I started and what I didn't have. My father went to the 8th grade, my mother went to the 7th grade. My grandfather left school when he was 6 years old. This is the greatest, I leave you with this thought, this is the greatest country on earth. And you are entering it in terms of beyond your education at a wonderful time. The next 25 years, it's ours. We own it. There's no place on this earth that has a better future than the United States of America. And that future is largely because I see kids like you all over. Go out and kick it in the ass and watch and see the wonderful things that'll give it your best shot. And I plead with you. Yes, there are excesses in the system. There is income inequality. I take 25 or 30 store managers. I'm retired now. I'm off. When we set the company up, Bernie, Arthur, and I all agreed 73 were gone. And so Bernie went first, then Arthur bought the football team, and then I was the last guy. I was on the board for 6 more years, and then I left when I was 73. And let me tell you something. We got these kids that would walk through fire, and they're good, and all they want is a shot. And the biggest thing we offer each other is the opportunity to rise to your potential. Do the best you can and give. Was I lucky? You bet I was lucky. But when you look at what the possibilities are, there's no place on this good earth like it. And all you got to do is, Christ, the only way I get into Yale is to get invited to something like this. I mean, shit, if I applied for Yale, they'd say, yeah, we need a groundskeeper or we need a guy to cut the lawn or some goddamn thing. But what I'm telling you is, you're leaving here with a fabulous education, and you're in a society where the demands are, the opportunity, I'm telling you about medical needs in the next 50, think about all of the ancillary needs that people are going to have when they're 80 and 90 and 95 and 100. There's going to be all kinds of job creation opportunities and all kinds of business creation opportunities, catering to older people, because we're living longer and we're living healthier lives. My grandfather at 83, he couldn't be doing what I'm doing. And guess what? That's what's out there for you. Leave here with an enormously high level of optimism and enthusiasm. And the thing I leave you with is my understanding of the 3 most powerful things in life are mine. A kind word, a thoughtful gesture, and passion and enthusiasm for whatever you're doing. I'm going to give you the only career advice I would give each one of you separately. Look for the job where if you had to pay to go to work, you'd pay. Look for a job where you're happy. Look for a job where you're motivated. Look for a job where you're turned on. There's no worse hell on earth than waking up in the morning and saying, oh shit,
Gotta go to work.
I go to that job again. Because the more you are where you are, that you like where you are, the more you're successful, it stands to reason. I take these 25 kids, store managers, I take them out to lunch in May at a little restaurant in Long Island, and I put them around a table and I say, oh, they're all store managers. I say, I want you to tell me what you like about the company, what you don't like about the company, a little bit of your history and so forth. I get to the last person here, woman. Here's this life story. She's 17 years old and she has a baby, no marriage. She has another child at 19, same guy, no marriage. She ends up on welfare. She shows up at Home Depot as a part-time cashier. She now is a manager of a store. She's paid off her parents' mortgages. Her 2 kids are in college and she's paying their tuition. She told the guy that was the boyfriend to get the hell out. She's got a nice home and she's got a bright future. This is a person that didn't get within 100 miles of Yale or any other quality institution. And look at the lives they made for themselves. You know, stop bitching and stop woe is me. Go out there and get your share of this world and just kick it in the ass. Give it all you got. But go someplace where every day you can. I can honest to God tell you from the bottom of my heart, there wasn't one day in my life after I got out of college when I wasn't excited about going to work. To this day. To this day. Tomorrow morning, I can't wait. I'm going to have a great day tomorrow. I'm going to go to my office and I want to bother the, you know, at my age, all you do is bother people. You don't get much done. I'm going to go in and bother the hell out of all of them because they can't do anything about it because I own the place, right? But I pay them pretty well and I think they're all happy, which matters to me. It's the same thing with, when I go to Home Depot, one of the questions I ask them, are you happy? Somebody's not happy. You got to do one or two things. You got to help find out why they're not happy. And no matter what you do, if they're still not happy, you got to encourage them, go find your career someplace else because you're not going to succeed here. Yeah. And then you're going to really be unhappy. Okay? Thanks for having me, and I'll see you at the reception, okay?